grew up in the 2000s, you probably have come across the game, or more accurately, the game has come across you at some point growing up. It's not as much of a game as it is an uncontrollable paradoxical mind virus that will stop at nothing to hijack your puny little monkey brain. Strangely enough, no one is exactly certain where this entity came from. All we know is that it gets to all of us eventually, because there is no escaping it. And if it has somehow never gotten to you before now, then I regret to inform you, but...
Hello?
Yeah, I was just wondering if I could hear some Tall Dwarfs. Is that possible?
Some Tall Dwarfs. I wonder if I can...
Yeah.
See if I can squeeze some in. I can't do it for you. I could do it for you tomorrow on the show.
Okay.
Will that work for you?
That's all right.
Give me a call tomorrow.
Tomorrow's good. I just lost the game.
Oh, what? You lost what game?
The game. Don't you know about the game?
Have we been drawn into something here?
Well, not really. Basically...
Before I explain, it should be said, after learning the rules of the game, your life will literally change forever. Once you know it, you can't unknow it. There's no going back. If you wish to live a peaceful life free of this burden, I would suggest you stop watching this video and never ask anyone about this again. But if that doesn't bother you, then let me explain. These are the rules of the game. Rule 1, you are always playing the game. Rule 2, every time you think of the game, you lose the game. And Rule 3, every time you lose, you must announce your loss to anyone who may be around you at the time. And that's it. If you think about the game, you lose. There are millions of ways something might cause you to lose. For example, by watching this video, you are uncontrollably now thinking about the game, which means you just lost. But just because you lost doesn't mean it's over. Because remember, you are always playing the game. This could be your first loss, but it will not be your last. You will just keep losing and losing and losing until the only thing that can free you is death. It sounds kind of stupid because yeah, it is kind of stupid, but regardless of how annoying it may be, it is undeniably a neat concept. It has supposedly spread only by word of mouth for most of its life, and there are no references to it in any kind of media before the year 2002. In this way, it was kind of a meme before memes existed. It is pretty widely accepted that the game has been around since at least the 90s, and it hit its peak in the mid-2000s. If you ask a baby boomer, they probably won't know what it is, but if you ask anyone who grew up in the 2000s, they will immediately be filled with rage and an overwhelming sense of defeat. So that obviously raises the questions, where did the game come from? Who invented it? And how did it spread to so many individuals that it has infected the minds of a whole generation? Well, as it turns out, the exact origins of the game are obscure and no one has a definite answer. But in 2005, a man named Jonty Haywood decided he would try and solve this mystery. So he created a website that would become the most popular source for gathering information on the game. LoseTheGame.com. Over time, thanks to his research and information sent in by visitors of the website, a story has been uncovered. While it is still pretty vague, it is the most reliable answer to where the game comes from so far. And it might not be what you expect.
It's Kerrang Radio, it's the night before. My name's Nick McHarrison, and with us we're delighted to have friend of the show, Jonty Haywood. Listen, Jonty, thanks for joining us, man.
That's cool. It's nice to be here.
Now, you are famous, right, across the world for the website LoseTheGame.com. Do you just want to quickly explain what that website is?
Well, it's all about the game, really. If you don't know what the game is, it's a mind game, a very simple mind game where the only aim is to forget that the game itself exists.
Yeah, that's right. Now, we've been doing this on air, but both me and you, Jonty, we've had this conversation before. We don't know where the game began, do we?
No one's really certain. I don't think we'll ever be certain.
Do you know what, Jonty?
While LoseTheGame.com was started in 2005, Jonty claims to have first found out about the game in 2001. And it just so happens that the earliest known online mention of the game was 1 year later on a blog called The Aardvark. The blogger said, "Okay, I'm going to tell you about the game. I have no idea where or when this started. I found out about it online about 6 months ago. I'd like to know the origins of the game, because it is intensely irritating." It became clear that most people learned it from their friends or at school, and several people even claimed to have heard of the concept back in 1998 or earlier. And strangely, it seemed that almost all the people who recalled having played the game, including Jonty, were from the United Kingdom. Keep this in mind. For a very long time, much misinformation and deception was circling around regarding the origins of the game. Every so often, a new person would claim to be the one who invented the game, and every time they had zero evidence to back it up. In an interview, Mr. Haywood is quoted as saying, Many people email me about how their friend created the game. There was an ocean of claims flooding towards Jonty, and he had no way to verify any of them. After all, the game is so abstract and confined to the realm of human thinking, it's nearly impossible to prove if any of these claims had any truth to them. But whatever the true story may be, it's unlikely that somebody just came up with the game out of nowhere one night. As a concept, it's somehow simple and convoluted at the same time, and I don't think that's the kind of game that someone just comes up with out of the blue. That's why in the sea of false claims, one developing theory stood out to Jonty as having a bit more substance. And soon enough, all the right pieces to the puzzle fell directly into Jonty's email inbox.
Now we're going to play the game called Mornington Crescent. We've had some complaints that the rules have been getting too complicated.
Now, before we dive into the emails that Jonty received, it's important to give the proper context. What you just heard was a clip from the BBC Radio 4 show, I'm Sorry I Haven't a Clue, and it was an example of their classic bit, Mornington Crescent. It's an imaginary game where, to put it simply, the goal is to be the first person to say Mornington Crescent, the name of a London station. However, the catch is that the panelists overcomplicate it and invent stupid fake rules to the extent that the game ends up making no sense. It's absurd, hilarious, and probably the most British thing I've ever heard.
It's ours in 3. Pall Mall.
Oh, yes. In fact, he can't do anything, can he?
No.
Charlotte Street. Mornington Crescent.
And John.
Now, Mornington Crescent isn't a completely new idea. In fact, it's actually based off of a very similar English game that seems to have been around since the 60s, called Finchley Central. It's basically the same game, except without all the fancy, overly complicated rules, and instead of Mornington Crescent, it's another station called Finchley Central. Two sides take turns naming stations until someone inevitably says Finchley Central and wins. This is a bit confusing, considering one could just say Finchley Central on their first turn and win, but this is seen as impolite and bad sportsmanship. I mean, you might as well just be cheating at that point. So instead, it is encouraged to hold off on saying Finchley Central until the perfect time comes. This game was covered by mathematicians Anatole Beck and David Fowler in a section of Manifold magazine called A Pandora's Box of Non-Games. In it, they say, "It is clear that the best time to say Finchley Central is exactly before your opponent does." It's unclear when exactly Finchley Central was first invented or by whom. However, some suspect the author David Fowler or popular mathematician John Conway had something to do with its inception. Regardless, you may be wondering what this game has to do with the game. On September 20th, 2007, Jonty's inbox was once again met with a story concerning the origin of the game. But rather than just being another dude claiming to have invented the game, this one was a bit different. It was late one night, and Adrian McCrickard had just missed his train home from London when he came across 3 other men in a very similar situation. And where else would they happen to meet than the station Finchley Central? As the 4 of them sat there on the railway platform waiting for the next train, one of the men taught Adrian a strange version of the game Finchley Central. In this version of the game, the first person to think of Finchley Central loses. And unlike in the original Finchley Central, this variation had no beginning or end, so you were always playing. Sound familiar? The game was taught to me by one of the 3 guys on the platform that night. They were just waiting for the train after a night out. Obviously, you can't stay in the station all night as they were closed after 12-ish. I can't remember his name, but he was a scientist from Esher. He had a yellow Triumph Spitfire and collected vintage port. This was in 1982, and I seem to remember it was invented while he was at university, which would have made it 1979 to 1981. This version of Finchley Central obviously bears a striking resemblance to the game, so is it possible that this rabbit hole could take us to the answer? That man that Adrian met at the station that night could very well have been the sole inventor of what we now know as the game. And if this is true, it could essentially mean that the game was first invented as early as the year 1979. Unfortunately, for a little over a year, Jonty received no new information on this theory, and the trail was completely cold. He would have to wait until December 2008, when a crowd of new eyes was exposed to the game thanks to an article published by Metro magazine. With newfound attention came new insights, and Jonty received another email, this time from a man named Philip Bryce. Philip spoke of a different event that had seemingly no connection to Adrian's fateful day at Finchley Central. He wrote, "A game suspiciously identical to The Game was invented in 1976 in the Horse and Groom in King Street in Cambridge one evening at the regular meeting of the Cambridge University Science Fiction Society. Richard Pinch knew John Conway, the well-known father of combinatorial game theory, and the conversation moved on from John Conway to game theory and then to von Neumann's definition of what made a game, which was something like this. The people playing the game must know that they are playing it. The rules must be known by everyone playing the game, and there must be an agreed method for defining who has won. So everyone tried to think of things we thought of as games that did not meet all of these criteria. After abandoning the idea of games with random rules and games that had no clear winner, the idea developed of a game in which you didn't know you were competing in until you weren't. The aim was to avoid thinking about a particular thing. Finchley Central was seen as something that one would not normally think about, and it was slightly comical, so it became the thing not to think about. On thinking about it, you had lost, were out of the game, and would indicate this by sticking your arm into the air. All the other players, generally a group of fellow CUSFS people who were present, aware of the existence of the game, and were awake/sentient, then had to avoid thinking about why someone had just stuck their arm into the air. The game generally was over in a minute or so, and a surprise victor was crowned, to no one else's surprise. So, the Science Fiction Society of Cambridge University appeared to be responsible for inventing the strange variant of Finchley Central. And the reason that it is so viral and so memorable is because it was made to be that way. It's one of the only games in existence to break all the rules of what it means to be a game. It should come as no surprise that this British game theory monstrosity was first conceived by some university lads during a night out at the pub. But that doesn't make it any less exciting that Jonty may have just figured out the exact time and place that the spirit of the game was created. These two stories were undoubtedly related, but Jonty was missing key information to link them together. That was until he received one last email that connected every piece of the puzzle. It came from Mark Haslett, another member of the aforementioned CUSFS. He wrote, "I am the person identified by Adrian McCrickard. I've been playing Finchley Central since 1976 or 77. At the time, it had only one rule, which was if you ever think about Finchley Central, you lose. It was played extensively by members of the Cambridge University Science Fiction Society, and many of the veterans of that time will still greet each other with the words, 'I lose.' I forget exactly who invented it, but I think it may have been Nick Lowe in answer to the problem of creating a simple game that was not amendable to game theory analysis. It is likely that Richard Pinch or possibly posed the question or indeed invented the game. At the time, we didn't realize what a viral concept it was, and I continue to lose from time to time now, 30 years on." So, Mark Haslett was the one who Adrian McCrickard met at the station that night. And he happened to be one of the people who was there when the game was first invented. Who exactly invented it? Well, it seems like the answer is they don't really remember themselves. But we can now be certain that it was a member of the Cambridge University Science Fiction Society. Mark says that it could have been Nick Lowe, Richard Pinch, or another anonymous member. But it's equally likely that everyone in the group contributed to the idea in some way, and the concept sort of created itself. So with this newfound knowledge, the timeline now looks like this. In the 1960s, a game called Finchley Central is popular in the UK. In 1976, a version of Finchley Central was created by the Cambridge University Science Fiction Society, where you lose just by thinking of Finchley Central. Then, in 1978, the first recorded instance of Mornington Crescent occurs on BBC Radio. And fun fact, some of the panelists from the show also went to Cambridge University around the same time that Mark Haslett and the Science Fiction Squad did. So it's possible that they too knew of the Finchley Central variant, and perhaps Mornington Crescent was partially inspired by it. In my opinion, this just gives even more credibility to the Cambridge University theory. Then in 1982, the incident at the station took place, and Adrian McCrickard learned of the game. From here, it's possible that he told his friends, and they told their friends, and so on and so on. That leads us to 2002, the first known mention of the game online. Now you'll notice a pretty sizable gap between the station incident and the first online mention of the game. This leaves just one question unanswered. How exactly did the Finchley Central variant transform into the game? Clearly, something happened during this 20-year gap. Well, most people believe that the name of the game had to change so that it could travel outside of the UK. Since the Finchley Central reference is exclusive to the UK, the name really wouldn't make sense for any foreigners. This is where most people believe that the game evolved to become self-referential so that anyone anywhere could understand and enjoy it. So, it is believed that the British adopted this new evolution sometime during this gap, spread the game with their friends in other countries, and the rest is history. So there you have it, the full origin story of the game. Except not completely. What if I told you it might go back even further than 1976? As far back as 1840, yes, you heard that right, 1840, Russian authors Leo Tolstoy and Fyodor Dostoevsky on separate occasions wrote about a game called the White Bear game, sometimes called the Polar Bear game. The goal of this game was to sit in a corner for 30 minutes and try your best to not think about a white bear. Obviously, by trying to not think about a white bear, you end up thinking about it more, which causes you to keep losing. Again, this sounds eerily similar to the game. It's unlikely that the Cambridge Science Fiction Society took inspiration from Tolstoy's literature, but it's certainly interesting to see that pieces of the game have existed as far back as almost 2 centuries ago. The reason that this seems to be the case is because the game relies on 2 key psychological effects. One, the Zeigarnik effect, which states that tasks that are interrupted are remembered more easily than completed tasks. In this case, losing a game is considered an uncompleted task because you didn't win. And 2, ironic processing, which basically refers to how attempting to avoid certain thoughts makes them more common. Since these 2 effects are practically the backbone of the game, it makes sense that slightly different versions of the game have existed for the longest time. It also makes the game seem all the more inevitable, as if the game was destined to be invented by somebody at some point, no matter what. This also means it's possible that the game has existed even further back than 1840, and was just undocumented. The game very well could have been around for a very, very long time. Just how long? Well... Yes, there is a theory that the game has existed since the dawn of time and will continue to exist forever. This theory isn't taken very seriously, but it's fun to imagine. With how simple the game is as a concept, it feels like it may as well just be a fundamental part of the human brain, kinda like a law of nature that will exist so long as humans have the capacity to think. After all, the rules do say that everyone, even those who don't know it, is always playing the game. This would mean that the earliest humans were playing the game, and the very last humans will also be playing the game. So if every person in existence is always playing, wouldn't that imply that the game has existed for at least as long as mankind? And if humans never existed, would the game still remain? These questions may never be answered. So, there you have it. That is everything we know about the origins of the game. The Cambridge University Science Fiction Society is almost certainly responsible for its inception, so next time you lose, just know it's all because of a few British university students. It really is incredible, though, the impact just one idea can have. The game has spread like a virus since its creation, and it is now being passed down to new generations. As aggravating as it can be to lose, in a way, it's kind of nice to lose. Because every time you lose, you can find comfort in the fact that you are losing along with all kinds of other people, from different parts of the world and at different stages of their lives. This strange little mind virus has unintentionally brought so many people together, and it reminds us that above all else, we are only human. No matter what your social status is or where you're from, the one thing you can always count on is that we all lose the game. And I'm sure you already know where this is going.
Think you lose, there is no way to win. That's the way the game is played, let me say it again. You think you lose, there is no way to win. Oh crap, I lost the game, is the phrase you keep in. You think you lose.
I want to thank Jonty Haywood for letting me use information from his website. I would say like 90% of the information from this video comes from his website, and there's still a lot more stuff that I wasn't able to include in this video, so if you're interested in hearing more about the game, definitely check it out. LoseTheGame.com has helped us learn so much about the origins of the game, and without Jonty, I'm certain this story would have been completely lost. Also, shout out to Lyte, who is responsible for the banger you just heard. I'll leave the link to the full song in the description. This video was originally going to be an iceberg video, but obviously I changed my mind at some point. However, that means there's a lot of info that had to be scrapped, so if literally anyone might be interested in a more thorough and excruciatingly detailed look at the game, let me know in the comments and I might make a follow-up iceberg video. In the meantime though, thanks for watching, and yeah.
The exchange is insane, but the result is the same. I lost the game. You lose, there is no way to win. That's the way the game is played. Let me say it again.